Welcome to the Greatness Together podcast. Curious minds unite. Mother-daughter conversations that delve into the heart of psychology. Thanks for joining us. Simonne, I have an early birthday present for you.
Oh my God, it's like 4 months away.
I know, but you're going to love this present. I couldn't wait.
Let's hear it.
I want you to meet one of my most amazing women that has ever influenced me in my career.
I'm right here.
Well, obviously you did come before Margie, but I do want you to meet Margie Warrell. So this book, Stop Playing Safe, was the book that I read 11 years ago when we decided as a family, but we weren't quite sure how we were going to do it, that I was going to start my own business. Her book, Stop Playing Safe, allowed me to, drum roll, stop playing safe and make the leap. I really feel like you're going to love her. Can I make a formal introduction?
I would love that.
Simonne. Meet Margie. Margie, my daughter Simonne, second-year psychology and totally somebody who lives the not playing safe and has been able to close the courage gap, my friend.
Awesome.
Podcast.
Awesome. Well, Simonne, a pleasure to meet you. Sarah, lovely to see you again after a long time. And what a wonderful way to be introduced to somebody. I'm honored and flattered. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, and just before we started recording, Simonne was asking you where you were from. And there is actually a very cool reason, and it beautifully fits with your book that I can't wait to jump in and talk about. Simonne, why are you curious about Australia?
Well, I kind of just randomly went for 4 months to work and travel, like the East Coast.
Awesome. Fantastic. Where did you go in Australia? Like whereabouts on the East Coast? It's a big coast.
Everywhere. You started on you started in Sydney and you just went all the way up to the
Yeah,
the
you
top.
went north. Well, if you went south, that's where I grew up, not north. So, there you go.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So she really exemplifies your message. It took me 30 years to be able to understand and really encapsulate what you continue to share with the world. And this one just gets it. So for those of us who are on this journey of closing the courage gap, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, tell us about your new book and share with us, who are the people that need to be reading it? Where does this need to serve the world, my friend?
Well, I think anyone who ever hesitates from doing what they know they need to do, whether it's to make a change, to take a chance, to have a difficult conversation, to set a boundary, or who feels like they've just sort of got stuck. They're feeling like they've hit a plateau, or, they're not inspired and excited for their future. I would also say this would be a great book for you.
So that's just about everyone that I know would fit into that description. Do you hear that often?
Well, I would say the reason I wrote this book is because I get to work with people from many walks of life, Sarah, and incredibly successful people too, who've achieved incredible things and have reached what most people would say is the heights of great success. But my experience is, and this is for you too, Simonne, is that it doesn't matter if with what's come before us, there's always going to be a need for us to grow in new ways. And so while you may have been really successful and you may have achieved it and created a really lovely life, we humans don't thrive when we are sticking with what we've known. We actually flourish and thrive when we're working towards something meaningful. And whenever we're working towards something meaningful, there's always going to be a gap between where we are and where we want to be. And often that requires courage to close it.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about your generation, Simonne, where you're all in that phase of building and growing. Do you find that sometimes people in that phase of pursuing and it's such a long road. It can feel so daunting. Do they feel like they are losing courage, do you think? Or
Like in university
yeah,
specifically?
university, starting a new life, different that early phase. What does courage look like in your generation?
Definitely lots of like experimenting, like
Mm-hmm.
especially in university, it's kind of a hard place to experiment just because it's like so expensive. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
you can just change major to major, and like I know a lot of people do, and it's great because it means that they're finding like that they're one step closer to finding like their reason and their
Mm-hmm.
meaning.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's like so many opportunities that university comes with. There's like co-op, there's meeting people, there's like research and stuff, like getting a part of like research.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think in this phase, it's like a very
Can feel
like
very overwhelming by the sounds of it.
even like a lot of people are moving away from home, starting a new
Mm-hmm.
life, starting from fresh, like with new friends, with new surroundings. So it definitely comes with a lot of risk and
Mm-hmm.
lots of not playing safe.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I guess
no,
what
absolutely. And I think there's often many choices, and there
Mhm.
can be pressure to make the right choice. Even going off to college, like which college should I go to? What if I get the wrong, I choose wrong? And what should I major in? And what if I get it wrong? And then when you're leaving, like what job should I take? Or what if I can't even get a job? There's at every point there's often a pressure, right? When you're worried that you're messing things up. Is that something your friends have expressed anything like that, Simonne?
yeah, actually, I have a friend that's like dropping out completely.
Oh yeah.
She's all the way up from like northern Ontario. Like you have to take a plane to get here and everything. So
Mm.
she's kind of hitting a wall in that standpoint. But on one end of the spectrum, it's like maybe it's for the better because
Mm.
again, like she's paying rent, she's paying tuition and all these things. And if she's not even enjoying it,
Hmm.
um,
That takes courage. That
mhm.
that talk about closing the courage gap to have made a big choice like that and then to go against the grain. You can't go to a party supply store and get, hooray, you paused your degree. Hooray, you switched degrees. I almost feel like those are the more courageous moments when you go
Mhm.
against the
Mhm.
grain.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people who stick with something because they're afraid of going against the grain, right? And you don't always know. But that's something I talk about in the Courage Gap, my new book, is how our pressure to fit in and to avoid criticism or to avoid feeling rejected or marginalized, often that fear of disrupting our sense of security, social security, keeps us from doing the very things we sometimes really need to do. And for sometimes that might be dropping out of college. But other times it could be obviously in a workplace, you get in a workplace and it's like, there's something I really want to say, but we're afraid to say it. And so we say nothing, but in the meantime, we know we're not being true to ourselves.
So, in the times that you've been coaching people and you've coached them over time, or maybe you've gone into organizations, you work with organizations over time, have you noticed a difference between those people who, like this young woman, who make brave choices that go against the grain early on, and how they show up in a place of courage later on? Is there any correlation between the more courageous you get earlier, the easier it is to be courageous later? Or
Yeah.
have you
Yes,
found
there
something
is.
else?
And yeah, absolutely there is. And that's why I think it's awesome. For instance, you going off to Australia for 4 months, I, what comes up for me is like more power to you. But that's not just to me an aphorism of, yeah, go girl. It's you literally empower yourself. And that impacts not just that 4 months, but it impacts your future, your life. I went backpacking around the world for a year when I was 21, and that I look back on that, 100% on my own before there was cell phones or emails or social media, and I couldn't call home and no credit card. So probably even a little more in some senses, like the risk was higher because no one knew where I was and I couldn't contact people. But I look back on that just like you going to Australia and go, it taught me self-reliance. It gave me confidence. I got better at discerning risk. Like, should I do that or not do that? You build a street smarts. I built some tenacity and as you did too, to kind of navigate travel on your own. And it actually, there's evidence to back this up, that courage is actually a learnable skill. It's like learning to make, a good, I don't know, omelet, or the more you practice doing something, the better you get at it. If you haven't done it before, you don't know how to do it very well, you might mess it up, but over time you get better at it. And there's a psychological, like every time in our brain we do something that's a little bit out of our comfort zone, we actually become a little bit more comfortable with doing those things. And so when you do something early in your life that, is a little bit brave, maybe for some people it's terrifying, maybe for you it's like a bit scary, but not terrifying, but you're still empowering yourself for other things, and your world gets bigger, and your confidence to do other things in the future gets bigger and bigger, to go, you know what, I'm going to take this job on the other side of the country or on the other side of the world, because you've traveled and I can handle it. It's like, just because I haven't been there doesn't mean I can't figure it out. And a lot of people can get caught living in really small worlds. And the less we step outside our comfort zone, the smaller our world gets and the scarier it becomes to do something, say, to move away from where our family and friends are. Like, that can be terrifying for some people, but it is massively liberating when you go, you know what, there's just a whole lot more friends for me to make out there, and I know I'll figure it out.
Mm. And when you look at the research, what we're curious, because this podcast has that psychology foundation to it. What you're mentioning about, the more we do it, the more comfortable we get, or the more it teaches ourselves that we can do this. Is there a neuroscience component to that? Does it actually change how we encode, how we process, how our brain works? Is there a courageous brain?
Well, what is there a courageous brain? What we do know is this: we all have different personalities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so some people have a naturally higher risk tolerance. I remember years ago, I got to interview Richard Branson, and he talked about early on in his 20s, he was married fairly young, he'd bought a house, and maybe he was in his early 30s by now. And it was back in the Virgin Records and, early days. And he said he took a third mortgage on his house in order to put more money into his business. And I remember thinking to myself when he shared that with me, I would not have that. I would not be willing to do that. I do not have that risk tolerance. So he was always like, there's always going to be a chance you might lose your money. Obviously, you're hedging your bets and you're mitigating the downsides. So you're trying not to lose your money, and you're trying to make sure that how much you can lose is, you put a hard stop on that. But the point being, some people would just are more comfortable with that than others. You look at a Bear Grylls, or one of my youngest son is 21, and Matt came out of the womb with just a higher risk tolerance. It was the day he learned to ride a bike. Within about 30 minutes, he's like, see, no hands, mom. Like, that was just the kind of kid he was, right? Not all kids are like that. So I think just to recognize, absolutely, some people have a higher risk tolerance. Some people are naturally more cautious, have a much lower risk tolerance. That's okay. But regardless of your personality type and your risk profile, you still have the capacity to build your courage. And some of the research that I shared in the Courage Gap is that courage has two core dimensions. One is the management of fear, and the other is our willingness to take action in the presence of it. And some people, and I think particularly today, and Simonne, your generation, where we know there's this epidemic of anxiety. Like a lot of young people are really struggling with anxiety at levels unlike any time in history. And it's not because the world is more dangerous. In fact, it's the safest time in human history to be alive. It's our perception and our constant exposure to messaging and to algorithms on our phones engineered to make us feel insecure and anxious, and being on the phone all the time and social media and comparison all the time and all of that stuff. And so part of it is managing our own fear response and our own anxiety level. And the other part of it is being willing to take action anyway.
Hmm. I'm seeing you nodding your head big time, Simonne.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know there's always stress online and social media and everything that your generation didn't really.
Well, we didn't have it.
You had other things.
The best we could help for is to be able to have parents who can invest in call waiting. So at least you could take a second backup call. Yes, we had a very different situation. And really, I think, you know, it's your generation has been exposed to this from the beginning. And then our generation is I think that we are experiencing the same stress of social media. And at the same time, we had all of these expectations of having to be a great mom, you know, a great partner, knock it out of the park when it comes to schooling, amazing in the workplace, take that promotion. My generation, I feel, is our challenge is that we compare not being good enough, and yet we have to be good enough at so many different things. Do you find that same piece around some people who are mid-career, midlife, have anxiety that they're just not cutting it? Is that part of maybe the playing?
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, true, Sarah. I think many people feel that. I feel that. And I think one of the skills to learn, which I've written about in The Courage Gap, is being able to step back from what we're telling ourselves and recognize not everything you tell yourself is true. Like you might be thinking, I'm not good enough. I don't have what it takes. I'm not measuring up. I'm a failure. Well, just because I'm saying that doesn't mean it's true. Or even if someone else is saying it to me, doesn't mean it's true. And I think we often live in deficit thinking, where we're focused in on what we aren't enough of, what we don't have enough of, what we can't do, what we think we need more of, what we failed at, what we didn't totally nail, you know. And I know you do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of speaking. And when I come off a stage, often the first thought that goes through my mind is, oh, I should have done that better. I didn't totally nail that. Gee, I should have linked that better here. And oh, that timing, you know, like bam, I'm like, I zero in on everything that I didn't do really well, and very rarely give a lot of time and have to work it to, well, what did you do well? Like to just stop and celebrate and pause that. But I think many of us do that, Sarah. And I do think, yes, there's generational difference in terms of the pressures and the messaging that we're dealing with. There's gender differences as well. So there's always going to be different forces that are shaping us and shaping our thinking. But I think for people just to recognize that what you're telling yourself isn't always true. And if the story that you're living in is not expanding what you see as possible, is not fueling a sense of power and purpose and positivity, then it's working against you. And just developing that habit of going, what is it I'm telling myself right now? And is this serving me or not? What else could I be telling myself? How else could I be interpreting this situation and my ability to handle whatever I see as I've got to deal with?
Yeah. And I think that the more we do that, the more likely we are to have teams that are having conversations about that as well. Maybe in an academic context, we're also more likely and willing to have those conversations. I always am fascinated with which keynotes people are asking for. And the number one keynote, in addition to my normal keynote, which is my recognition one, is the flip side of failing. So this is about unconditional recognition. And again, why I think it's so so common right now is because these high performers and who have chosen to be part of agile teams, innovation projects, they want the stretch and they want to do something that's truly meaningful. This is the time to put all of your chips into something that is really a game-changing opportunity. However, it not going to market or that innovation not being innovative enough to be able to actually be adopted by the organization can be a little crushing for people, which creates this interesting dynamic of team tension. You have all these high performers who have chosen to stretch the boundaries of performance, yet when it comes to the performance being challenging, it's just so uncomfortable. So I would love, your wisdom if you could share when that happens as a collective, when people are trying to figure out how do they manage fear and how do they manage that in action together, is there a way in which that formula, that group formula, is can be one that no one person kind of has to be the one to push everybody forward? Is there something you see in a group dynamic that really helps with building that being able to act even when there's fear, even when there's struggle, there's strain, there's imperfection?
Yeah, well, and I think part of that, a key dynamic here is emotional contagion. And emotions are contagious.
Mhm.
And even if we intellectually might disagree with people around us who are being negative or anxious or cynical or they're disengaged, etc., it is very difficult not to have that rub off on us in some way, right? Just that energy of the space we're in. So I think key when it comes to groups is just recognizing there is actually something called group affective tone. It's like, what is the affect, the emotions of the group? And that group affective tone, the emotions of that group, the general mood, if you put your finger on the pulse, and sometimes, we'll do pulse surveys and go, what's the pulse of this group? And, what are people pumped up about and excited about? And is what they're excited about exceed what they're afraid about? Because I write about this in the Courage Gap, that our commitment to what we want to achieve, to a positive outcome, has to exceed our fear of a negative outcome. And so often in a group there may be some anxiety, like, gee, we don't know what's coming here. And there's a lot of uncertainty and we're worried about layoffs and restructures and Gen AI and all the things that could be befalling us and policy changes. Yes, but are we collectively committed to a bold vision with a big why? And we may have to adjust our strategy and how we go about it, but there is a lot of positive energy that exceeds that anxiety level. And no one person can ever turn an entire group around, but every single person can have an impact on those around them. And actually, I wrote at the end of the book about how change happens in circles and not rows. Because each of us, we don't just impact one person, we impact all the people in our orbit, and all those people, they're interacting with people in their orbit, and has this amplification effect for better or for worse. So if I'm being incredibly negative and I'm a fear monger and, oh, this could go wrong and that could go wrong, and I'm anxious, that's got a ripple effect in a negative way. So, and sometimes, when I've worked with big organizations and they're like, oh, this place, we've got so many problems. I'm like, well, maybe you can create a beachhead with a particular part of your business. Like maybe over here, this team over here, they've got a great leader. There seems to be a lot of positivity, optimism, can-do spirit. Let's see if we can at least make a beachhead with these guys and then roll out change from there too.
I love that concept around positive deviance, to assume that it is working somewhere. There's courage somewhere. Where is it? And why don't we go study it and replicate it and create those ripples from there? Yeah. I told you this would be a gift. This conversation.
Yeah.
meeting Margie.
Mhm.
I told you it would be.
It's a good gift.
Yes, it
Very
is a
good
good gift. It is a good gift. So, as we wrap up our time together, is there anything else that you really hope that as people are listening to this, and again, we have folks who are as young as Simonne, just beginning their academic careers through to folks who are near the end of their careers. What do you think is the most important true message that people need to remember at the beginning through to the end of their career? If you could teach or remind people of one thing, what would it be?
That the full human experience means embracing all of the notes, the high notes, the low notes of what it is to be a human, and none of them should be out of bounds. And you never want to live in the middle octave of life, but go the full spectrum. And the more more willing we are to feel anything, including heartache and fear and all of those emotions, that actually the more it liberates us for everything. So our world expands in proportion to our willingness to feel uncomfortable emotions, because it actually also increases our capacity for joy and love and delight and for doing really brave things with our lives.
I just got all over goosebumps.
That's really good. I
Mhm.
very much agree. I think living in your comfort zone all the time, like you don't bring enough to your life, and there's so much more out there, and so much more you could see and do, and people you can meet, and opportunities that are hiding. But if you just wake up for your 9 to 5 every morning in the same city since you were born, not offense to anybody who does that, but there's still time to search for bigger things and just like find your courage and stop playing safe.
Exactly. Because you know what, too, Simonne, that actually playing it safe in the end is the most unsafe thing you can do with your life. Now, I'm not talking about being reckless or stupid or, running across a freeway with your eyes closed. That's stupid. I'm talking about taking worthy risks. And for your mom, that was leaving a job that wasn't making her feel more alive to go and do something that would, even though she wasn't quite sure how she was going to make it all work. She just knew she had to do it. And so for you, it's about going, you know what? I mightn't always land things perfectly well, but I'm not going to let my fear of what could go wrong keep me from being in action to make things more right and create a bigger, more exciting, more meaningful life. And if you live by that formula, honestly, you can't go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that danger aspect or danger thing you were talking about also has like a mental aspect. Like you were saying, if mom didn't move, probably her mental health would start deteriorating and everything. And then that just kind of has a ripple effect with the whole house, knowing she's our top of the hierarchy. But yeah, and you were even talking about earlier, like risk, like when you were backpacking for that year, you learned like your way around risk, or safety, like you know what to avoid, what to feel comfortable in, and kind of how to maybe get yourself out of sticky situations. But
Certainly less naive.
less naive.
And, I think on that, I know we're finishing up here, but just on that, right? Life is inherently risky, right? You walk out the door and like things can always happen. And the problem is, Simonne, and I think particularly your generation, even more so, being so pummeled with reasons about how dangerous the world is that people are afraid to live their lives fully. And they have a magnified perception of risk that is disproportional to the real risk. And we know this if you think about even the body's immune system. What we know is that if our bodies aren't exposed to germs and viruses, actually we become less immune to them. It's why they say don't use disinfectant all the time. Because if you're constantly like trying to disinfect your environment, and you're actually not going to get the exposure you need to build a hearty immune system. I grew up on a dairy farm where we didn't have very good hygiene at all, and I literally never get sick, or so rarely. And so, I mean, in 40 years, I haven't had a day where I've been stuck on a couch. My body fends off all those things. It's not that I'm not exposed to them. The same happens in our lives. If we're continually going, oh, I don't want to do that, it could be too dangerous, I don't want to do that. It was why when people wearing masks well beyond the pandemic, moving on, it was like, you are actually making yourself more vulnerable to catching all array of viruses. But it's the same in our lives. It's when we go out there and go, I'm going to try things when I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing. I'm going to expose myself to situations and people, not in a reckless way, but I'm not going to let my fear of, oh, well, I don't know my way around this city keep me from going to a new city. Like giving yourself permission to do things that maybe it triggers a little insecurity, but over time, it's going to make you way more secure in yourself. And it's when we don't do those things that we ultimately live smaller lives, become less secure, and ultimately we become more vulnerable over time to many, many things. And the people who are thriving in life are not people who are always playing it safe. They're people who are constantly stretching their comfort zones.
I'm really hearing a call for courage, curiosity. So what would be different if I just tried it? What's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? And to your point, what's at risk if I don't take a step forward towards courage? Yeah. There's very few things that there is no course correction option. Very few things. I don't think I'm willing to take out a third mortgage. However, I'm very glad that I, left my job. We got debt free so that we could shift. Margie, I would have never imagined that this business that I have and doing the work that I do and spending time with people like you and being able to have a business where I have a conversation with my daughter every 2 weeks for our podcast. I couldn't have imagined that. But one courageous step forward leads to the next and leads to the next, and now becomes your baseline of what might be possible. And that's, I think, courage. I think we should call this courage, curiosity. How do we build courage, curiosity? Something along those lines. What do you think?
I think it's great.
Awesome.
I think
Tongue twister.
Tongue twister. Thank you so much for your time. And, more importantly, perhaps, thank you for all of the hours that you dedicate to writing books that matter, to continue to challenge us to fully embrace the entire experience of our lives. Every one of your books, I have it. Every one of your books, I learned something more about myself, about the world. I get a little braver each time. and I want all of those things for you, Simonne, and all of your friends. So thank you for continuing to build this body of work and helping us to take the steps to live full on in our life. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too, Sarah. Simonne, I'm excited for whatever you're going to paint on the canvas of your life. And I look forward to staying in touch, Sarah, more often.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us for the Greatness Together podcast. Never miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you catch your podcasts. Yours in greatness, Simonne and Sarah.